Well, hello, my name is Evan Reese, and on behalf of the US Resiliency Council and our series sponsor, Optimum Seismic, welcome to this 8th event in the Resilience Advantage webinar series. We hope you've had a chance to enjoy previous webinars and video episodes, either live or recorded. You can find them on YouTube and our websites. Today's episode is going to focus on rating systems for building performance. So ratings are at the core of what the USRC does. We were founded 11 years ago as a nonprofit organization because a core group of seismic professionals believe that people deserve to know how their buildings might perform in a natural disaster. And they needed tools like rating systems and access to the facts like this educational series. Now, ratings aren't a solution for every challenge we face with the built environment, but they are a powerful mechanism we can't afford to overlook as we strive for a more sustainable, equitable, prosperous, and resilient future. So we'll be talking today about the USRC's earthquake rating system, but also a new wind rating system that we're developing and successful rating systems of other organizations that are all playing a role in the resilience movement. So first, we'd like to acknowledge our major partners in this effort. These are organizations who have joined with Optimum Seismic, not just in this series, but in many ways over the years to focus attention on the vital message of earthquake resilience for our business community. These include the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce, the Los Angeles County Business Federation, and the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation. Thank you to those organizations for being our partners. So today our format's going to be a little bit different. The US Resiliency Council is our webinar champion. So you're going to meet Dr. Cheryl Rabinovich. She is the USRC's Director of Strategic Communications, and she'll be co-hosting with me and moderating the panel later. So Cheryl, welcome. Why don't you give us a little, give the audience a little background on the US Resiliency Council, why it's both the champion and the co-developer of this series, and also why it's so important to support the resilience movement and organizations like the USRC and the others that you'll hear about later today.
Thank you, Evan. It's my pleasure to be here today. I've been with the USRC since 2014, first as a volunteer, then as a board member. And in the past 18 months, coincidentally with COVID lockdown, which blessedly we have emerged from in California this week, involved mainly in strategy and communications. So I'll talk first about the Resilience Advantage series, which is one of our signature activities for this effort, for our efforts this year, in a format appropriate for the times. This is how we're communicating now, on demand, visual, via Zoom with all of its blessings and curses. We've been able to produce 8 episodes viewed now by thousands of people, including yourselves. Thank you for coming, audience. And the 9th is coming up in July, which focuses on public policy about natural disasters and how we can take action before the fact, not waiting until we're chasing the last disaster. Policy is my own field of expertise. And I come at it from a multi-hazard background. So one of the things I'm excited about USRC is that we have a multi-hazard vision. Next slide. The second activity that we've been working on this year that I want to tell you about is that we have launched the development of a wind rating system, our second disaster threat that we want to empower people with a rating system to make better decisions in advance about. And we've pulled together a technical advisory committee with some of the leading researchers in this domain. These rating systems are only developed through intense partnerships on the technical side, and they're implemented through intense partnerships on the implementation side. So we're excited to be able to announce that, and we'll tell you more today. We have in research underway a fire rating system, which is also one of the hot issues of the day. USRC has done research with its partners available soon on our website involving some of the key vulnerable buildings. Next. The tilt-up concrete problem is real around California, the nation, and beyond. Also, soft story apartment risk is another topic that we've been able to research how ratings relate to retrofit possibilities. What kind of ratings can a retrofit building obtain? What are the right kinds of retrofits for these structural types in order to get better performance out of those buildings? Next, we have our efforts on incentives. So we know that people need mechanisms in order to be able to afford to mitigate risks. We know that they should be rewarded for their efforts to mitigate risks. So we've been trying to partner on mortgage discounts and insurance discounts, and increasingly seeing how non-financial but still financially meaningful incentives like expedited permitting, which we're exploring with the California Building Officials CalBO organization. Those are other important things that we're doing in order to expand the reach of our rating systems. Just a quick thank you now to our founding members and clients. You can proceed to the next slide. We are excited to be able to offer and explain this tremendous support we've received from some of the largest engineering firms in the country. We have clients that include universities, government agencies, and global 1,000 corporations, and the support of all the major professional organizations for structural engineering in the country. We would not be able to have launched or to reach the successes we have today without these organizations' support. And finally, we have our board leadership. Evan and I are the only staff members for the USRC. We rely on volunteers, and our board is at the core of that. We have financial and insurance experts who have served, industry partners, innovators in the technology of resilient design, and just want to acknowledge their role before we move on. So how great is it to be joining as one of the many champions that have supported the series so far? I welcome questions from the audience that you can put in the chat in the YouTube as we move along through the program, and hopefully we'll be able to address as many of those as possible during our panel discussion after the episode. I'm going to turn it back over to Evan now, who has a few more words to say before we dive in. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. We'll get started with our program about ratings in just a moment, but first I would love to recognize and thank Ali Sahabi, who's the co-founder of Optimum Seismic. It was really his vision that set us on the path to co-create this series. He's been a tireless leader in sustainability and the resilience movement, building coalitions to raise awareness, and their company has been a very active organization in retrofitting, designing, and protecting thousands of buildings around California. So Ali and Optimum Seismic, thank you for all the work you've done. So without further ado, we're going to jump right now into our video episode, Knowledge is Power, How Rating Systems Deliver Resilience. Welcome to the Resilience Advantage series, brought to you by the US Resiliency Council and Optimum Seismic. I'm your host, Evan Reese. In this series, we're exploring what resilience means to the long-term sustainability of our communities in the face of natural disasters like earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, wildfires, and now even pandemics. In this episode, we'll be focusing on building performance rating systems, how they empower better decision-making and drive higher functionality in buildings, resulting in more resilient communities. To begin, let's consider what we mean by building performance rating systems. I asked the US Resiliency Council's policy expert, Cheryl Rabinovich, how rating systems help consumers make better decisions, especially to manage risk.
So we're all familiar with a lot of different rating systems in our lives, from the service industry, restaurants, hotels, energy efficiency, and many more. At heart, what a rating system is about is choosing what we want and how much we want to spend relative to what we're going to get. It empowers us to do that. One of the best examples is the car safety test rating system for shopping for automobiles. What that rating system does is allow us to comparison shop between the trait of safety and all the other things we might want when we're buying a car. So a rating system helps us assess trade-offs. This is a helpful analogy because safety is not the only criteria we care about when buying a car. Clear and credible, consistent information helps people make better decisions and weigh the trade-offs.
So taking it up a level from individual decisions, how do ratings translate into more efficient markets, grounded in facts and not assumptions?
Public policy research shows that rating systems, they can powerfully influence market behavior, not just by giving people more and better information when they make decisions, but in a way that's less coercive, not necessarily passing a law and telling people what they have to do. People start wanting to build, serve, produce differently because they know they're going to be rewarded for offering that better product, because the fact that it's a better product is easily visible to the consumer.
There are a number of building rating systems out there that focus particularly on green and environmental design and performance. But green design alone is not enough to fully understand sustainability.
That's exactly right. A certain performance rating for sustainability does not assure that a building is going to do well, stay functional, or even be repairable after a flood, hurricane, fire, earthquake. So a disaster like that could wipe out decades of sustainability gains that we've made in terms of new construction. And that's not even factoring in the 80 or 90% of buildings that are existing and that are not as resilient to hazards. I was immediately interested in the idea of ratings for earthquake performance for buildings because ratings have worked so well in so many other domains. And it's really appealing just to give people information they didn't have access to before so they can make better informed decisions for themselves.
Indeed, it's a misconception to think that codes or laws are going to assure buildings will remain functional after a disaster. The US Resiliency Council was founded with the mission to clarify these misconceptions, but also to show stakeholders that the kind of performance they may want from their buildings is in fact achievable, and often quite affordable with good ROI.
So advanced rating systems like the USRC's also quantify performance in multiple dimensions. Importantly, building codes deliver a minimum threshold of safety, but USRC measures safety and damage and recovery time, each on a 5-star scale. So this allows any party to a transaction to objectively calculate a return on investment in resilience in the same way that a business owner might calculate the benefits of investing in new equipment or a new business opportunity. So that's critical.
Sophisticated building owners and cities are now seeing the value and starting to reap the rewards of investing in both sustainability and resilience. Michelle Jones is a senior principal at RIM Architects in San Francisco and was part of the team that designed the USRC Gold LEED certified office building at 85 Bluxom Street in the city.
I think that the type of tenant that is interested in leasing space in buildings in San Francisco are very savvy. They're looking for LEED certified buildings. Certified is another program for creating wellness in interior spaces. And then the USRC, our developer owner, was absolutely ecstatic to be able to add that to the mix. And so now he has an asset which he intends to hold for years and years that is very easily marketable. And in comparison to other assets or other projects that tenants can lease, this project is going to stand out as compared to others.
One of the USRC's partners is FLASH, the Federal Alliance for Safe Homes, led by CEO Leslie Chapman Henderson. I interviewed Leslie about her work around resilience to storms, primarily in the south and eastern U.S. Leslie is acutely aware that for many owners, the fear of disasters alone is not enough to spur action. I asked Leslie how she thinks building rating systems fit with Flash's approach to emphasizing public education.
We know it's not a good idea, because it doesn't work, to try to scare people into good decision making. Just our human nature is such that we're going to check out. We're going to just tune out, and we're going to walk away from anything that's just too scary, especially if it's a low probability event. So our formula, and it's been this way for many, many years, is to instead empower them with achievable actions, affordable decisions, and information that they can then turn into good decisions.
Leslie, how do you think that building resilience rating systems fit with Flash's approach to emphasizing public education?
I think that rating and helping people understand the potential performance of their building that they're either renting or buying, living in, working in, and giving that calculus to figure out the potentials there is fundamentally the only thing that is ever going to help society get engaged on building performance. In America, we rate everything. You know, everything we do in this country is about a scorecard because it's the easiest way to transfer an understanding up and down of how things are going to go. And so I think rating buildings and what the US Resiliency Council is doing to give that tool to the public, whether it's renters or owners, is essential. What we need on the building side and don't have yet is transparency in the marketplace, but we also need it to be forward-looking for the future so that the renter comes asking for the resilient building.
Market transformation is the underlying goal of rating systems, achieved by empowering people to make better informed decisions for themselves.
The landlord and the marketplace will respond because if there are choices between a resilient place to rent and one that's dangerous, the logical place is that they're going to choose the more resilient. We just need to help them understand that this is a new social norm and it's a fair expectation that you should live somewhere safe.
IBHS, the Insurance Institute for Building and Home Safety, has developed a wind hazard rating system for single-family homes and commercial buildings. Fortified ratings give building owners specific criteria to evaluate and improve the resilience of their properties. And IBHS has been successful in working with states along the southeastern coast to achieve insurance discounts for fortified rated buildings. Building rating systems create a virtuous cycle where the more the public becomes aware of distinctions between buildings, the more demand is generated among owners to become leaders themselves.
When I first got involved in this industry 20 years ago, green building was something that was just emerging. But for most of these developers, they're out once the deal is done and the building is finished. So it took really requiring this stuff, making it mandated for people to start saying, oh, okay, I need to be doing this. And then also that combined with tenant demand. You weren't going to get a major tech tenant to lease out 10 floors in your building unless it was LEED rated. If you're a building owner, you want a building that's going to last. And you want a building that's going to be safe for people, enjoyable for people, and that's good business at the end of the day.
Building resilience rating systems have the potential to supplement or even replace current industry financing practices that are often imprecise, outdated, or sometimes even gamed because parties to the market transaction aren't incentivized to fully acknowledge existing risks.
One might think that financial institutions are already very good at measuring the risks of their portfolios, but not really so for building risks due to natural disasters. That's evident trying to manage climate change right now. There aren't always consistent methods available to do that, but in the financial world, there's a lot of pressure to make sure those transactions go through. And engineers are not immune. They're often in a position to interpret the data in a way that will help the deal proceed. But what happens then when the buyer sells or bundles their assets together? After an earthquake, we could be in a situation which is similar to the 2008 financial crisis. where people misunderstood the risks of a bundle of assets, and it came back to haunt us all.
As part of the Resilience Advantage series, we've interviewed several business associations and chambers of commerce leaders in Southern California, like Tracy Hernandez of the Los Angeles Area Business Federation, or BizFed, and Laurel Rosen and Colin Diaz of the Santa Monica and Culver City chambers. They see resilience as the next natural extension of the commitments that businesses have made and opportunities they've reaped from sustainability.
Over time, people start seeing the benefit of it. It sets a standard, I think, that is really good. When there's a standard, then people know what to expect. Having a standard on that gives people something to use in marketing. I mean, really, that's business 101, right? You have something that's a great idea or good or service, and then without marketing, you don't have anything. So it should give people an edge, I would think.
The timing is so important because in a sense, it's almost like the effects of an earthquake. The communities are shaken to their core. Things aren't the way they seem. There's a little bit of uncertainty. And in the midst of all that uncertainty is oftentimes the best time to do different things, to think outside of the box, to look at different partnerships, to reprioritize what's important. There's a saying, know better, do better. And clearly the research is out there. The statistics are out there that support why you should make some of these changes and why you should be proactive.
Financial institutions and insurance companies are considering how they can use the standardization and technical credibility of building resilience ratings to reward better performing buildings with lower borrowing costs or insurance discounts, just like a discount you can get on your home policy for having a burglar alarm system. Sorrel Hansen with FM Global, a worldwide insurer, believes in the potential of ratings, not just to reduce a company's risk, but also in the amount of insurance they may need to carry.
Well, a rating system like the USRC building ratings can really help a building owner or even a larger company with many buildings understand what that risk is, understand how resilient their buildings are, and start to prioritize where they would make improvements or how they want to transfer that risk, or a combination of both.
Building resilience rating systems can also be used by donors and community-focused nonprofits to better pursue their existing goals. Camilla Seth is an expert in sustainability and finance. She sees potential in ratings to help philanthropists target their giving and better measure what those investments are able to achieve.
The notion of focusing intentionally on building resilience is relatively new for philanthropy, and it has not been thought about as explicitly as it needs to be. There's a lot of focus post-disaster about how you run a lot of different programs, how you ensure business continuity and so forth. But I don't know that people have focused sufficiently in the philanthropic and community development sector, for example, in the role of buildings and in what needs to be thought about in advance about ensuring building resilience. So their headline strategy may not be disaster resilience, but disaster resilience is something you need to ensure and to address in order to achieve these other goals. Why? Because we're facing disaster after disaster after disaster. So we should also be increasing the attention and the funding that we bring to assuring that buildings are resilient.
Lori Schumann of Enterprise Community Partners is an advocate for using resilience ratings to help improve how housing and economic development programs target their investments.
The issue around building owners, and I've worked with hundreds of building owners around the country at this point on this topic, they have very limited reserve, very limited resources, growing more limited by the day. They have pressures, enormous pressures on them to support a variety of resident needs, as well as deal with an enormous amount of compliance from the federal agencies, state and local agencies that regulate them. A rating system will help us start the conversation about how to quantify their risk and quantify their improvements We are desperate for a way to quantify the return on investment for this work. In a community, for example, if you have a benchmarking based on a rating system, the city can then use that information to go into FEMA and say, we'd like to apply for hazard mitigation grants. And here's why we know that there's a need for performance. Here are the gaps. Here's the rating and the scores of the buildings that we need to prioritize. So the rating system will not only help the owners, it'll help the regulators and the program directors and the housing departments figure out where their greatest vulnerability is as they seek investment.
Throughout the Resilience Advantage series, we've featured the stories of buildings and owners who are receiving the benefits of investing in improved earthquake performance and using building rating systems to measure and communicate these improvements. These cases demonstrate the wide range of building uses and structural system types, both new and existing, for which rating systems are being obtained. Casa Adelante, 91 units of 100% affordable housing for low-income seniors in San Francisco's Mission District, achieved a resilience rating for less than 0.25% additional cost of construction. Casa Adelante went from an ordinary building to one where its occupants won't have to seek shelter after a repeat of the 1906 earthquake. In Portland, Oregon, the US Resiliency Council awarded silver ratings to 4 100-year-plus-old seismically retrofitted unreinforced masonry buildings. Critics may take the position that building a new office building or apartment would be easier. But there's both intangible beauty in history as well as economic reward, safety, and environmental benefits to be found in preserving the past and adapting it to new uses. The Roseville, California City Hall Annex was the first public building to receive a Platinum Resiliency rating in 2016. Several other public buildings have been rated since, including the new base-isolated Oregon Treasury Building and the State of California's Clifford Allenby Building, which will help California state offices stay operational in the face of an earthquake. USRC has certified commercial, residential, hotel, office, big box retail, and high-tech laboratories for their expected resilience performance, with owners that include state agencies, universities, developers, and nonprofits. When it comes to making our new and our older buildings safer and more resilient to earthquakes and other natural hazards, there is always a struggle to justify spending money now to reduce the impacts of disasters sometime in the future. Whether a small owner of an apartment building, a large high-tech corporation in Silicon Valley, a university, or a town, today's needs often weigh against tomorrow's risks. Building rating systems provide owners, tenants, and financial markets with objective, credible, and measurable metrics about the social and financial value of resilient design. Rating systems allow building stakeholders to communicate with a common language that is easy to understand but is built on state-of-the-art science and engineering. In our next episode, we'll explore how public policy can and is being used to improve the resilience of communities and businesses. Mandatory and voluntary programs that also educate and incentivize build a culture of resilience acceptance and are succeeding in moving us toward a stronger future for us all. Please join us next time on the Resilience Advantage. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Resilience Advantage. This is normally the time when I would introduce our panelists and begin the Q&A portion of the webinar. But I'm going to be a panelist today, and so I'm going to trade seats with our moderator, Cheryl Rabinovich, who will introduce us and lead us into this next phase of the webinar. Cheryl, take it away.
Thanks so much. This is the second episode that I've had the opportunity to do this on. The other one was in February on the topic of community resilience. And so it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Today we're going to have 4 panelists. Evan Reese, Executive Director of USRC and co-founder, Fred Malik from IBHS's Fortified products. He's their managing director. Mark Moore, a structural engineer principal with ZFA Engineers based in the Bay Area. And Ryan Kolker, Vice President of Innovation at International Code Council, and also Executive Director of the Alliance for National and Community Resilience, and a coalition that USRC helped co-found. So we'll be moving through talking to those panelists. Please enter your questions in the YouTube chat as we move along. And we hope you enjoyed the episode. And now diving deeper into some of the topics that were brought up in the episode with our panelists. So first, we're going to start with Evan. Hello again. And I just want to say you've been the main interviewer and moderator throughout the series. It's a little bit weird for a structural engineer to, be on stage like that. But today you've finally got a chance to settle in a little bit more and talk about why you got into this field. And specifically, tell us a little bit about what led to your helping found the USRC and how it's arrived at where it is today.
Well, thanks, Cheryl. Thanks for having me on today. So my background is I'm a structural engineer. I had as a structural engineer, you'd call it the good fortune of starting the year right before the Loma Prieta earthquake, because a year later in 1989, when the earthquake happened, I was just engrossed in a lot of retrofit work, looking at performance-based design and measurements of performance. So really cut my teeth on a lot of work in that space, and then started to sort of translate into more sort of risk-based consulting with the companies I worked for. The idea being that it was one thing to design a building the way you're supposed to do it with code and do that all behind the scenes. It was another thing to be able to communicate the different options that an owner might have for how to build a building so that it performs better. And that really sort of coincided with when the US Green Buildings Council started to really grow in its LEED rating system, and folks started to adopt green design as sustainability, as this idea that having a low impact on the environment through green design was how you achieved a sustainable building. And as an engineer, it was very important for me and others to make the case that sustainability is really more than just about green design. It was about resilient design as well. That is where the environment has a lower impact on us. And you learned a little bit about that in our previous episode. So that led myself and three other folks, two other structural engineers, Ron Mays and Kate Stillwell, and a mortgage banker of all things, Eric Von Berg, to co-found the US Resiliency Council back in 2011 as a way to contribute to the sustainability movement, as a way to make sure that resilience and good engineering design were thought of as part of the whole sustainability movement along with green design. And so really the main focus of the USRC has been to allow building stakeholders to make better decisions. Really, in a nutshell, that's what it's about. It's about giving them the tools through the building performance rating system and through the kind of educational work that we're doing to give them the tools they need to make decisions about how to design buildings to different performance standards, how to retrofit buildings, how to incentivize those that do. So that's how we started. We started as a purely volunteer organization, and we're working our way towards our own sustainability through a great group of over 90 members, issuing nearly 100 ratings so far, and educational programs like this, like the Resilience Advantage series.
Thanks, Evan.
Sure.
So I'm just going to cut right to it. Ratings sound really great in theory. And yet the reality is it can be difficult to generate momentum around a system like this. Maybe tell us a little bit about some of the key challenges that the USRC has faced on this trajectory. Open the lid a little bit on what it really takes.
Sure. Well, there have been several challenges. One of the challenges has just been sort of a misconception in the public sphere about what building codes provide. And we talked a little bit about this in a previous episode about, say, the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand, where, that was like those two earthquakes were big earthquakes. Those were the sort of the big ones that you'd expect in a place like New Zealand. And in Christchurch, only two of the thousands of buildings in the downtown area collapsed, and that's where most of the people died. And when engineers think about that, we say, wow, the rest of the buildings protected the people inside under sort of the largest earthquakes that Christchurch could ever expect. That's a success. But obviously, so many buildings were damaged, and the downtown was about 50%, ended up being about 50% demolished. Is still, slowly recovering. And so the people that live and work there, think of it as a catastrophe, really. And so there is this misconception about, well, if you build a building to code, it's going to be earthquake proof or disaster proof. And sort of getting people over the hump to understand that really what codes are about is protecting the lives of people inside the buildings. And that's the primary focus. And then going beyond that to protecting the buildings themselves, reducing recovery time, that's not as evident sometimes in code. So that's been one of the big challenges is the education of building stakeholders to say, well, that there's more that can be done to really provide resilience than just the building code provides. Another challenge has been providing communication tools. As an engineer myself, finding the right tools to communicate to owners about resilience is one of the challenges that the USRC has been trying to help engineers overcome. So providing them with educational materials, with case studies like we highlighted in the video in the previous slides that you showed. Those are all ways to help structural engineers communicate with architects, communicate with building owners, to sort of make the case for how resilience can be achieved. There's a misconception that resilience costs a lot of money, that, gosh, it might double the cost of the building to make it more resilient. When in fact, most studies have shown that if you have a new building, going from something that is that Casa Adelante that we showed in the video of an ordinary building to something extraordinary like it is, might cost less than 1% or 1% or 2% at most of the building cost. And from that, you can achieve performance that protects the building, that protects the asset, that reduces recovery time. So making the case that there are efficient and affordable ways to achieve resilience. And then I'd say the last one that we continue to work on is this idea of shared benefits and shared costs. When a building is more resilient, everybody benefits. Right? Not only the building owner, obviously, and the tenants or the residents inside the building, but the city benefits by continuing to have a building contribute to its economy, its property tax base. Lenders, insurers all benefit because that reduces their risk. And so one of the challenges that we are working to overcome is to have all of those organizations, all of those stakeholders that benefit from resilient design also contribute to the investment it takes to make buildings more resilient. It's a win-win for all stakeholders, so we should all contribute. So we are working towards that. It's a slow process because a lot of folks don't like to change, but it is something we're seeing a lot of movement and a lot of encouraging signs in.
Well, that's good. So I heard you say a couple of things. One is you have to convince people that they need something and then provide what they need. If you think your current building is fine, then you may not think that you need anything else. That's a serious communication challenge. So you have to communicate two things. Where you are is not where you thought you were. And here's where you could go for, what reasonable amount of money, and face those trade-offs head on. It's not always appealing, but we got to do it. It's our responsibility, really, to tell people the facts. I know that you are a structural engineer that's focuses on earthquakes. So were most of the founding members, except for the financier who was involved in the founding of USRC. But it's really exciting this year that we've finally started to realize the multi-hazard vision for USRC rating systems. Can you say a little bit more about the effort I mentioned earlier to move into the wind rating system space? We're not the only people who are innovating in it, but I would love if you could share a bit more about our multi-hazard efforts and how they're growing.
Sure. Yeah, I'd like to talk about some of the initiatives that we have underway. So earthquakes. Well, a lot of people think it's just a West Coast problem. It's not. There are earthquakes in many other parts of the country, the Midwest, the Southeast, even the Northeast. But we recognize that there are other natural perils that are important to a large segment of the population. So we were very pleased early this year to have launched our wind rating system. And we do. We have experts from the American Society of Civil Engineers committee that worked on a performance-based guideline for wind. We have experts from University of Florida, Florida International, MIT. So great researchers that are all helping us develop a similar type of structure for quantifying damage and recovery time for buildings subject to wind and storm surge. So we're very excited about that. We hope to launch it in time for next year's hurricane season. And we're also proposing to develop a wildfire rating system. We've requested a grant from the federal government, and in combination with the Applied Technology Council, which is really one of the industry's leaders in developing great research projects for engineers, we developed a wildfire rating system that obviously we know the applicability of that. So we're very excited about getting those two rating systems started and completed, and then we'll move on to some of our other hazards like flood and tornado as well. Just to talk a little bit about some of the other incentives that we're working on, or initiatives that we're working on, I did mention just now this role of incentives in promoting resilience investment. We have been working with banks, both public side banks like Fannie Mae and private banks, as well as insurance companies and insurance brokers, to be able to offer incentives by way of mortgage discounts or higher loan to value ratios, or lower insurance costs for buildings that are resilient, that achieve USRC ratings. We recognize that, when the risk is lower, the bank has a lower risk of default, the insurance company has lower risk, so there are benefits there that we really want to be able to see translate into meaningful incentives for owners. We're also working with Calvo, as you mentioned earlier in the show, to look at ways to reward developers and owners that build buildings more resiliently by way of expediting permits, things like that, because again, it's a win for the city when their buildings are more resilient. We're working with, on the financing side, with members like Partner Engineering and Science, who's been a leader in developing the sort of due diligence and transaction space, to really make that space robust and credible. We're thankful to have their support, so that again, there was more sort of consistency among sort of the lending practices around resilience. Educational series like this, and we'll be offering soon other educational opportunities for folks that want to dive a little bit deeper into learning about resilience, get certain certifications for that. So that's exciting for us as well. So there's a lot going on. The support of all of our members and donors is really important, but I think we're set to achieve great things in the next couple of years.
Thanks, Evan. One of the slides I didn't get a chance to talk very much about earlier was our volunteer committees. So we do offer a lot of ways for people to become involved. There's an industry partners committee, a marketing council, an educational offering committee, and really volunteer energy has been what's driven the organization forward. So if you're interested in that, let us know. Moving to our second panelist, Mark Moore, another structural engineer. who has been involved in rating buildings. We want to give you a little bit of the practicing engineer's perspective on what's that like. So Mark, if you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, your work in resilient design, as an expert in making a resilient building happen and getting a rating for that building, how the client felt about it.
Wow, that's a lot of big statement. Thank you for the introduction there, Cheryl. My name is Mark Moore. I'm a practicing structural engineer. I hope to get it right one day, so I'll keep practicing. But my background, so I came over from New Zealand after the Loma Prieta earthquake and got stuck into doing retrofit of bridges, the infrastructure in California here, and stayed ever since. Really important when working with projects is, you're always trying to seek as an engineer to add value. And so as my career evolved, I got more and more into what we call performance-based engineering. And the structural engineers, when we talk about performance-based engineering, we talk about displacement, stress, and probability of earthquakes, etc. And Evan touched on this. It's one of the biggest hurdles with resiliency is that the engineers speak in one language and we're not conveying the true message that the stakeholders need to hear. And so the USRC with the rating system has been an excellent tool for someone like myself to talk to business people, decision makers, how to build a business case. So what we've done is from an individual building, we went ahead and did the Bluxham project and provided a rating system. Well, I went and applied for a rating. And it was great to be able to work on the project. And then I explained to the developer who was putting up the money to build the project that if we increase the amount of steel in the project, which would normally get me fired, it was actually improving the leasable area, increasing it, as well as providing a more resilient building. And he goes, wow, this is not going to cost me much because the rate of return on the larger building is going to be paid off in about 3 years. And then you're saying my downtime after an earthquake is going to be weeks instead of months. That's really valuable for me to be able to market the building. And so it was a win-win. And then another case I've got is when applying the rating system is when you've got a large portfolio. I got 2 campuses, over 2.5 million square feet for a client, and they wanted to help prioritize the buildings in terms of which one should we really work on? What's the business case? And it was always hard with the tools that we've got because we do analysis after analysis, and it wasn't really giving the information in the form for the decision makers to say, here's the business case. Whereas a star rating system boils it right down on the safety side of it. And then we're able to turn around and aggregate it for a campus and say, this is the cost. This is the potential impact, potential downtime. So
yeah. One of the things that strikes me from what you just said is the importance of comparison when you're trying to convince people about something. You need to know what am I getting relative to? And I'm wondering as a member of the design team, how do you guys kind of work together to be able to show the client the options and what they get differently and what the price difference is for those options? Is that more work? And how does it work on the design team to really come up with what those options should be and price them out and so on?
Well, the great news is the tools are being developed like SP3 software that the engineers can use. And we're actually able to do parameter studies at the beginning of the job, at the beginning of the project, and then we can feed into the design process. What are the options? What are the benefits? And when you do that, you can capture the opportunities. When you try to do it at the back end of the project, you can't change it, and you miss out. So fortunately, we've got the software, we've got the technology now that we can go through and do the parameter studies, optimize our system selection, and show the benefits in tangible, like downtime is a great one from a business case when you start to talk to clients about that.
Do you think you've actually sold some of the architects you've worked with on this, not just developers, construction teams?
Absolutely, in particular with RIM Architects. We work closely with them, with Michelle Jones, and very much Michelle is gifted in getting us at the table to speak about a certain topic at the right time with the right audience. And so in that kind of positive environment, we can do that. There are times, in all reality, it's a business that, no, we just want the square box, bang it out. And so, sometimes yes, many times no, but we'll keep trying.
It's not right for every project, but there are those opportunities there, and you're able to give those options. Thanks, Mark.
What's more important is for the engineers to just be thinking in the terms of it and to know that the software is there. And just to know that when they're making design decisions about their systems and the detailing, what are the impacts to the building functions? So instead of focusing on structural engineer, think about a building that has functions, and their decisions, how that can impact the performance of the building is really important. I do have one last quick one, if I could slip in.
Sure.
About this transparency and this misunderstanding about codes. People say to me, well, I want to be safe in this building. And this is where it gets confusing. We say from a regulatory standpoint, from a legal standpoint, you're safe because it's code compliant. Now, when I say it's code compliant, therefore it's legally safe, that just means it conforms to the code, but that code could be from the 1920s, 1930s, or 40s, when there were very limited, if any, earthquake.
That's right.
provisions.
That's right. It's code as built, not code of today.
Yes, it's grandfathered in. And then it's hard to say, yes, you're safe, but then turn around and say, but when I look at your building, it's an unsafe building. And it's true from our supermarket to our public schools. And that's one of the biggest hurdles we have to overcome. And that's why it's important that we not talk about in terms of safety, but it's part of the story. The bigger part is the business case, the downtime and the cost, and moving on from burying our head in the sand because I'm regulatory compliant, therefore I'm safe. Thank you.
Yeah. When I want to emphasize that codes are extremely important, and the code, I mean, in many cases, performance-based design engineers are helping to write and improve those codes, but they evolve more slowly than we might hope. There's always those legacy buildings that haven't caught on to the improvements that have been made since. And it really is not appropriate to aim at super high functionality for all buildings. So having it be code plus it gives the owner that choice rather than setting the bar super high for everybody, which isn't going to fit. So the codes are extremely important, and meeting current codes is still a hurdle for a lot of buildings. So thanks for clarifying that point a bit. I'd like to talk now to Fred Malik, who's coming from IBHS Fortified system and managing that program for this large national organization. And honestly, Fred, it's one of the most advanced rating systems in the natural disaster space. So I congratulate you and your organization on that. I understand you're coming from Florida today to be with us, another place that is threatened by climate change and a lot of natural hazards. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your role in this field, how you got involved with IBHS, and what the Fortified rating system is able to do for homeowners and some commercial clients there in the South and East.
Sure. Thank you, Cheryl. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today and share a little bit about what we do at IBHS and through the Fortified program. So I'm a builder by trade. That is what I did before I came to IBHS. I've been working with the Fortified program for 11 years as part of IBHS, but prior to, I was a residential home builder, a land developer, a commercial builder, and I had some personal experiences that made me interested in resilient construction. Some family in and we experienced Hurricane Andrew firsthand down in South Florida. And I realized that I needed to really understand what I was building better and how to do it better. And so ultimately that got me interested in resilient construction, and then I found my way to IBHS. IBHS, for those of your viewers who do not know, we're the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety. We are a nonprofit trade association that works for the property insurers. Essentially, we look at the risks that they feel like they have in property insurance, and then we develop strategies and analyze different building methodologies to try and find ways to reduce that risk. And so much of what you were talking about in terms of understanding what your risk is and presenting your building or your home as a better risk to unlock the potential for a different cost of ownership is part of what we are designed to do. And if we're successful, everybody wins. It's less costly to insure buildings that shouldn't be as costly to insure. Homeowners and commercial business operators spend less time in recovery and getting back to normal, resuming normal operations. Communities find that their workforce can be stable in the event of a natural disaster and get back to work more quickly. There's a shocking statistic that's out there that, if a building is forced to close due to a natural disaster, or a business is forced to close due to a natural disaster, and it stays out of business for long enough, the workforce in a population will migrate away, and that business may never reopen. And so being able to get people back in operation more quickly is certainly a desirable goal for a number of reasons. So what we do with Fortified primarily, IBHS has a research center located in South Carolina where we can study large scale on full size buildings, the effects of wind-driven rain, wildfire, and hail. And you've talked about multi-hazards. And some of the ratings that you guys are developing to address multi-hazards, and we do a lot of the science and the work in that space.
Appreciate that. I was going to ask a little bit about what drives it, from a technical standpoint. But I first want to get a little bit of a clearer idea on who your rating system is for. Who do you see as your clients or your market?
Sure.
And what kind of uptake have you seen, among those groups? How are they perceiving the need and, realizing it through a Fortified product?
Well, we've certainly encountered and have many of the scars that we've heard about, talked about today. That the importance and the need to educate, to transform people's buying behavior and their preferences, for sure. And consumers, both from a building occupant perspective and a developer or building constructor's perspective, people have been trained that code is what they need to shoot for. And there's been some good conversation already here on that. And the important codes are critically important. And we're a big supporter of building codes. But as has been mentioned, the code has evolved over time, but consumers, and even pretty sophisticated consumers in the way of building owners, fail to recognize that there's a difference between code 20 years ago and code today. And so, that term code compliant really is misrepresented and misunderstood. And so that's why something like our Fortified building designation or other rating systems can help to provide much needed in-depth clarity about what we are really talking about here. What is it we are really saying when we say a building is resilient or even code compliant? But you asked about our market. So Fortified has primarily focused in the residential space. We have spent the better part of the last decade really working to open up the single-family detached market, and that's really where we have started to gain the most momentum. We've got about 30,000 people who live in Fortified homes as of today, and we are seeing that momentum start to increase. We'll designate between 10 and 15,000 homes this year, and we expect that we'll see that increase again next year.
Can I ask you, Fred?
Sure.
what percentage of them are kind of new construction homes where a developer is, creating a planned development and all the homes are going to be fortified and then they're sold to people versus kind of someone doing some upgrades on their house more on a one-on-one basis?
Sure.
I'm curious about that.
So the way we attack resilience is we look at what are the primary sources of loss when an event occurs. And so we've been able to understand that roofs fail in the majority of cases that where you have an insured loss. It's about 90% of the homes that actually file a claim have some sort of roof damage involved. And then as the intensity of the storm or the longevity of the storm increases, then you start to see things like window and door failure and even ultimately structural collapse. But you can make meaningful adjustments to your risk by focusing on the more frequently occurring phenomenon like roof damage. And so that's where we start. So we have a fortified roof level, we have a fortified silver and a fortified gold, and we progress up the chain of resilience, getting to a more comprehensive type of resilient structure. But the long and the short of it is our business has evolved. We originally launched the standard in its current form to be a retrofit standard. There are millions of at-risk buildings out there. We wanted to give people an opportunity to do something about that, even with limited resources. And so we focused on re-roofing. But almost immediately after we launched the standard, we had new home builders that came to us and said, "Hey, look, we're not too far from what you're trying to do here. Can we do it as new construction?" And so we adapted and evolved. And so now about 65% of our users are re-roofing and retrofit folks, and about 45 to 50% are new construction. So we've got some high volume folks that do all planned developments fortified, and then we have custom home builders that use it as well to distinguish themselves in their given markets.
Yeah, that's a really important point you make there. I come from kind of more academic public policy. So I've studied and read the literature on how rating systems, affect behavior in kind of an academic way. And one of the clear key findings is that rating systems really take off when there's a third party who can find a way to make money on selling them. So the rating system developer needs to be kind of the neutral third party, setting the standard, but then somebody has to be delivering on the standard and showing their client that it's worth meeting that bar. And that's when you really start to get market traction. So congratulations on reaching that milestone. And I think, that's tens of thousands of homes that are going to be able to better weather hurricanes. Hurricanes happen really frequently. So you might say, why isn't everybody just jumping on board with this? But roof retrofits don't happen very frequently. So you have to kind of wait until a problem happens right in your neighborhood and you need to do a repair or, wait out that cycle of when people are making that investment anyhow. So,
well, the interesting thing there is that, roofs are exposed 100% of the time. They're never not exposed to the environment. And, about 7% or so of roofs in a given market are replaced every year due to age, damage, whatever. There's ample opportunity to encourage people to take a few extra steps. And really, when you're re-roofing, you could dramatically reduce your risk for less than $1,500.
Yeah.
And most people just don't know that. And we spend a lot of time, a lot of our resources in educating roofing contractors and educating local stakeholders about, hey, these are possible things. These are things that are possible even with a modest investment in modest resources. You still have to overcome the consumer's desire to have things that make them feel good versus the things that may or may not be called upon to protect them in any given year. I mean, as Leslie mentioned in the recorded piece, while people are used to hurricanes occurring and hitting the United States, they don't hit in the same place every year. And so people feel like they're playing a game of roulette maybe, or a game of chance, and leaving their risk to fate when they don't have to do that. It is a common misconception that you do not have to leave your family's well-being to fate and chance. You can make informed decisions at critical times, and you can make a lot of difference.
What you're talking about, that is critical time, is interesting. It happens with earthquakes too. Most retrofits are done when a building owner is making other kinds of upgrades, and the retrofit work is bundled in at the moment of planning your renovation. So there's an opportunity window there. That's
Sure.
the right moment to communicate the options that people might not have thought of. And it's not just an upsell, it's a protection, almost an insurance policy that you're taking out on all of the rest of the money that you're spending. Just that little increment more can protect the investment that you just made in your new kitchen and your new porch and your new garage door and so on.
That's absolutely true.
All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm going to move now to a little bit more of a group discussion, letting our panelists interact a little bit. We've talked about rating systems from the perspective of what's different about them from codes, rating systems for different structural and use types. I'd like to ask, Mark, how do we get to the same level of success that IBHS has had with Fortified in the earthquake space? And feel free to expand to single family homes if you want to make more of a apples to apples comparison, or talk about the bigger players, whatever makes most sense to you.
Oh, well, I don't know. Fred's done a good job there and set the bar really high. But it goes back to, the frequency of the events, of the hazard. And, earthquakes are not an imminent threat. And so it's not here. So, you look at the pandemic, how hard is it to put on a mask? Yet how long did it take us to do that? So that's the uphill battle here, is the communication, the education. What does code compliant really mean? Fred did a great job of discussing that. So I think it's just more discussion, more public awareness, not to go out there and scare them, but that's number one in marketing, is you got to scare them first to get their attention and then help inform them. And then I come back to that business case. It doesn't have to be a bad story. There's a good story here, and that is, if you've got critical operations, you really care about your bottom line, you want your business to be able to resume as fast as possible after an event.
Yeah, there can be owners who have millions of dollars more in the assets they have in the building than the building itself is worth.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes they might have research that's been going on for 2 years. And if they have interrupted power, that research has to start over again. So, it's not the building, it's the contents, it's the function inside of it. And that's the thing the structural engineering community needs to be far better at. I walked the building. There was a tilt up. Hey, we retrofit it to immediate occupancy. It was biotech. And I said, oh, what's in the fridge that's on wheels over there next to this storage rack? Oh, that's got $4 million worth of contents in it. Do you think we should protect that?
Irreplaceable biological samples, and the fridge isn't well enough connected to the wall, but the wall is going to do really great.
Hey, my building's standing, but all my expensive content just got through.
Yeah. So that's what makes it really a team effort too, between the engineer and all of the mechanical consultants and architects and so on.
Sure, it comes down to engineers are a little bit passive aggressive, and they're afraid of being the messenger, and they tend to say, well, and like to talk in code language. And I think we need a little bit more brutal honesty from the structural engineer. That's what I really think we need.
All right. Well,
Cheryl, I was going to say, I'm sure that those of you who are engineers recognize and relate to that comment. But I do think that you made a couple of really important points there, Mark. One is consistency. Part of the challenge in persuading people to pay attention to something is when you are able to have a consistent message and you take the confusion out of it, because people, when they're confused because they feel like it's too technical for them and they don't like to admit that they don't understand what they're talking about, they tend to find reasons not to do something. But if they hear the same thing consistently from professionals that they trust, you obviously are one, Evan is one, other engineers that you've talked about have that professional respect. That's important for being persuasive. And then the other piece is, like you said, I think it's really important for folks to act more as consultants. Engineers in particular, there's a significant amount of trust and respect that comes along with that PE or SE or all those initials after your name. I don't have them, but you guys do, and so by that simple fact, you have the opportunity to really be an informer in this important space, and I applaud you both for doing that.
Well, a rating system, it strikes me, might help more people access that kind of expertise. Not everybody is hiring a structural engineer for their home renovation. But if a contractor has an understanding of a retrofit quality, a standard that's been approved and adopted, and they know what they can offer the homeowner based on that, maybe you get a little bit of transfer of information there from the expert to the implementer on the job site. Hopefully it can reach more people that way.
Yeah, I think the rating there does what Fred touched on, and that is the consistent messaging. The problem is if you have two engineers, you're going to get three opinions. There's too much of that. And the rating system, particularly when you get that verified report, I know from the top business people, when it becomes a verified report, they get that confidence that they've got consistent messaging. That's when we can become persuasive and pull the head out of the sand on this code-compliant story.
When I made the analogy in the video to rating systems of other types, there are some interesting distinctions. And one of them is that some ratings are crowdsourced. So a lot of the rating sources we talked about are, everybody has their own personal experience with a restaurant, and you get a wide variety of opinions. And then kind of the average opinion is what you end up getting seen in the star rating. This is a different kind of way of creating a rating. It's expert dominated, and you get the opinion from the top people in that field of what it should be delivering. That's an important distinction in the type of information that you're getting from this kind of rating.
Well, I think what's more important, Sheriff, if I could just add on, I hate to keep bumping in, but what's really important for the USRC is their independence. They're not there with a business. I've got a business hat too, as well as an engineering hat. And so the USRC gives that confidence to the client that the rating is independent, truly independent. And that's really valuable. It gives a lot of credibility to the messaging.
Yeah. And like Fred said, it's based on testing and verification, more like coming from the insurance world. Oh, Fred, I didn't ask you about the insurance incentives that are available for getting Fortified rating in your communities where you work. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you've been able to embed the Fortified rating into insurance pricing in several states? That's a really important development that you guys have achieved.
Sure, and I think there is an important opportunity for me here to distinguish a little bit about what we do. So as a trade association with a high level of technical expertise in this particular space, what we end up doing is being a subject matter expert for a variety of folks, our member companies, for local legislators and regulators, and that's really where the incentives come from. We don't lobby for incentives or particularly for insurance incentives because the market needs to be able to price efficiently. But what we do is particularly when a regulator, for example, in Alabama, about 10 years ago, Alabama experienced Hurricane Katrina, saw insurers leave the market en masse because they just didn't see the risk there was insurable. And so they were desperate to try and attract companies back. And so one of the things they decided to do was look for a way of providing a robust incentive for folks that were building to a higher standard. And so they put into law a mandate that said that if a home is a fortified home, then it has to have, then an insurance company has to offer a actuarially sound incentive for that. And then other states copied that. Mississippi, North Carolina followed suit. Oklahoma has followed suit. And so that got the ball rolling. And then as that started to take off, we saw other incentives come in. We saw insurance companies start to voluntarily offer endorsements for additional coverage that said, if you experience a loss, we'll put it back better than what you had it if you have this endorsement. We have had folks that have expedited permitting. We have had tax incentives created where if you invest in resilience, you can deduct up to a certain dollar of value in that year's tax year and get something back. So there's a lot of people who can provide little bites of the pie or pieces of the pie to build up a robust set of incentives when you make good, sound decisions. Insurance rates are only one piece of that. But certainly it helps. The more that you can cobble together, the more that you can bring together, and the more financially persuasive you can be, the more interest you get. There's no doubt.
Great. Thank you. That's a really exciting development, one that we hope to model after as soon as we can. Evan, I wanted to ask you about another effort that the USRC is involved in. You are co-founding a member of the Alliance for National and Community Resilience because the individual home, the individual building is incredibly important building block. But what we really want is those benefits to scale up, not just benefiting that particular property, but also what kind of experience the entire community has from a natural disaster shock. So tell us a little bit about ANCR, Anchor, why USRC helped found it, and what it's doing at the community resilience scale.
Right. So Anchor, Alliance for National and Community Resilience, is a project founded by both the International Code Council and Ryan Kolker sends his apologies. He is in a board meeting and won't be able to answer this question as the executive director of Anchor, but it's a co-project between ICC and US Resiliency Council. And its idea is to basically take a lot of these individual elements of resilience that apply to buildings or products or processes in a community and bring them into sort of a benchmark, not so much a rating, but a benchmarking system for communities. So right now we have communities on the East Coast sort of testing this out, applying several of the benchmarks that Anchor has developed, which include the work that has been done by groups like USRC and IBHS and others to sort of rank their communities in terms of resilience and see where they can improve in the future. So it's very exciting. It's a way to, again, sort of recognize that individual buildings or products all relate to and generate more resilience for our community. So we're very excited about that. I'll also say that, engineers like myself, like Mark, we often get focused in on the building itself. And a lot of us work on projects that are, fairly transformative for universities or large laboratory facilities or high tech or other companies. But, there's a lot to be said, too, of course, about making sure that our more vulnerable populations are protected. Thousands and thousands of people in California live in soft story buildings, for example, which are apartment buildings that have parking underneath. And there are some ordinances in place in a few cities around California to require that those be retrofitted. But when you think of the potential risks that could happen with thousands of these buildings around California in a large earthquake, you're not only affecting, obviously, the lives of the people inside the building, but the livelihoods of small businesses, of the owners of the properties themselves. And so one of the initiatives that the USRC has really been focusing on is to get these incentives going for affordable housing, like Casa Adelante, is a perfect example of a great affordable housing building that was built to high standards, but also for retrofitting of existing older soft story buildings. Right now, we've been promoting the idea that infrastructure funding that's coming to California now through the COVID relief and future infrastructure plans, that even a small percentage of that, for example, being spent on grants or other kinds of incentives for property owners to retrofit soft story buildings can make an enormous difference to California and other states that would do the same thing. We recognize that, resilience is a community effort. It takes a whole village. That means it takes all the stakeholders, from the owners themselves to advocacy groups, lenders, insurers, cities, to all sort of make the case that we can and need to have a more resilient environment. So that's kind of what we're working on right now.
That's great. Opening back up to everybody, where do you see resilience headed on the national stage? Where do you see us needing to go, and how can we get there to realize the full potential of disaster resilience rating systems?
Well, I can just follow up a little bit on that because I've been engaged with a number of organizations that are looking at federal initiatives, the Build Back Better type of campaigns. This idea that functional recovery, the ability of buildings to recover and get back in operation more quickly, is an essential component of the recovery of a whole community. So there's work at the federal level, at state levels, in bills that would both require and incentivize functional recovery type standards for buildings. The FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Association or Agency, has just prepared a large document on functional recovery. So what you're seeing is federal and state recognition that we do need to grow this idea of being better prepared to recover from the inevitability of natural disasters. Not that we're not trying to reduce those frequency by our work against climate change. But we recognize that we're going to have to adapt to some of these in some way. So again, a rating system, a quantifiable, objective, credible rating system that can measure the compliance and goals of some of these broader policies, I think is really important. I think that's a big place in the future.
So we have to work on that technical basis, and then on the policy and implementation basis, keep both of those moving forward. Fred, you were going to say something?
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Evan was saying there. I mean, I have been doing this now for 11 years or so, and I have seen a shift in appetite over those 11 years. And I am seeing now genuine interest from a variety of stakeholders leaning in. We're trying to capitalize on that by expanding our product offering to include multifamily. We're starting to see more commercial buildings that are coming towards the Fortified standard and utilizing it. We're seeing federal dollars flowing into projects that are using systems that are acknowledged to be technically superior to the status quo. And so, that I think it now is the time to be able to really lean in and push forward with that, because I think it does resemble very much so, Evan's earlier comment on the success of green building in USGBC. People are starting to acknowledge and understand too that there's more to sustainability than environmental comfort and energy efficiency. And, it's a lot of those things that you can't see behind the walls or under the roof cover, that affect your building's durability. Those things play a vital role in your and how you live and work in your community. And so I think the environment is great for it now. I think people are open to hearing about different approaches. And I think there's a lot of stakeholders that are coming together around this, including USRC, IBHS, Flash. There's just a lot of great groups out there that are all really pulling on the same side of the rope, which is great.
Well, and I think
it's great to see more than just the public and private. It's the private, the individuals who got to step up. So this is a village, as everyone's saying. This is, let's all get into it. And I feel optimistic about it. That it's getting more traction.
Yeah, and the more that companies like Mark, like ZFA, take that lead in getting out in front and start promoting, building resilience, how to achieve it, they're going to be better situated when some of these programs really get locked in place. So, great kudos to Mark and his company for sort of taking that chance, because I think it's going to really benefit them in the long run.
Well, and along those lines, if I could chime in real quick, I do think it's important for groups like USRC, IBHS, and others to shine a light on early adopters, because that's what helps make that business case for the folks that are going to follow behind them. Is they're going to see the business development, the business opportunity for early adopters, and that's what's going to draw them in and pull them in. I was a residential home builder for a large tract builder for a number of years, over 15 years. We didn't do anything first. We followed established trends. And so once we get people to recognize that there's an established trend, the tidal wave will crest and we will see wholesale change.
Yeah, have them be the leading edge, not the bleeding edge, and it'll be far more attractive.
Well, I'm really excited about the metrics that are coming out for climate change that businesses are truly paying attention to, analyzing their supply chain risks. Resilience needs to be in on that wave because it's so closely tied. And I really hope we're starting to initiate some conversations with critical players in the resilience to climate change market. And I hope we can deliver on that in the next couple of years. Well, I always wish that these conversations could go longer and deeper, especially when you have experts like we've been able to assemble here, who put their heart and soul into this movement. I want to just say it's clear from what we've just been discussing today that rating systems are out there. They have tremendous potential and increasing traction in a variety of hazard domains, parts of the country, multiple scales from the individual building to the community level and beyond. And also our goals, what we expect from buildings, we're aiming higher with good reason for ourselves and for our communities. And engineers are working hard to support that. And we hope you have appreciated the insights you've gained from the episode and our discussion today. So thank you to Mark Moore. Thank you to Fred Malik. Thank you to Evan Reese and all the participants, interviewees in our episode and previous episodes and webinars from this one. Thank you guys. And a recording of this episode and webinar will be available after the show on the Resilience Advantage homepage. We'll show you how to reach that. And next, I would like to thank again our promotional partners who have helped us reach people with these presentations. Without that advertising, without that connection to their networks, there's no way we would have been able to reach the wide variety of sectors, from business to academic to insurance to other engineers who want to increase their effectiveness in communicating on this topic. That wouldn't be possible without those partners. Turning it back over to Evan to say a few final words about the series and what you can expect coming up. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Cheryl. And again, a big thank you to Fred and to Mark for participating today. One of the things I'm asked about often is membership in the U.S., in USRC. We're a nonprofit organization, and we would greatly value your memberships and donations to help keeping these kinds of series coming and promoting resilience and resilience rating systems. So we'd be happy to have you as members and get it so that you can get engaged more in what we do. And finally, I'd like you to register for our next webinar in July. Our webinar is going to be called Policy Options for Before Disaster Strikes on July 21st. And please go and register for that now. We hope you will enjoy it. So again, I want to thank the whole team for making this webinar happen. Thank all of the attendees for taking your time today, and enjoy the rest of your day.